She picked up the blade herself, and I don't think she even flinched. That single choice is the moment I believe changes everything about who Rhaenyra becomes for the rest of this war. I don't think this is just grief anymore. I believe episode 3 is where the show finally starts turning her into the queen the books warned us about, Rhaenyra the Cruel. Does that title actually fit her yet? Or is this only the beginning? For years she fought for a crown that was already hers by right, and I think the show wants us to remember that every single time she does something brutal from here on. She has the throne now, but I don't believe she has any idea what it's about to cost her. What do you think she's willing to lose next? I believe killing Sir Otto herself instead of letting Daemon do it tells us she's done looking like a queen who needs a man to do the hard part. I don't think that was mercy. I think that was a message. Was she sending it to her enemies or to herself? Money is the next problem I think nobody's talking about enough. I believe the show is setting up a queen with a crown and almost nothing to fund it. What happens when a desperate ruler starts making decisions she can't take back? Meanwhile, I don't think Aemond is done, not even close. I believe he's still out there, wounded but alive, and Ormund High Tower is the one holding the largest army left in Westeros. What if the biggest threat to Rhaenyra isn't a dragon at all? I think Daeron changes everything the moment he steps back into this story. I believe if Rhaenyra is really becoming the ruler I think she's becoming, then a young boy with real Targaryen blood isn't safe just because he's a child. Would she actually go through with it? I don't think Alys Rivers is healing Aemond out of kindness. I believe she wants Harrenhal, and I think she's finally found the one card powerful enough to force Daemon to give it to her. What does Aemond owe her the moment he wakes up? I believe Ormond is about to become one of the most dangerous men in this entire war. I don't think people are ready for a legitimate heir, a massive army, and a dragon all lining up behind the same banner. Is anyone actually prepared to stop him? And then there's Daemon. I think his next mission looks simple on the surface. Hunt down whoever killed Jace. I don't believe he knows yet that the rider he's chasing is his own daughter. What does loyalty mean to a man who has to choose between his wife and his blood? I believe this is heading somewhere painfully familiar. A parent forced to choose the crown over their own child. I don't think Daemon has shown us enough of himself with his daughters to make that choice easy to predict. Does he protect her, or does he hand her over? I think Aegon's silence is the loudest thing in this entire season right now. I don't believe a king just disappears from a story like this without a reason. What happens when the throne he ran from still needs a face, and he's not the one standing there anymore? Every one of these threads, I believe, is about to collide at once. A queen hardening into someone crueler, a healer chasing power through leverage, an army marching under a new heir, and a father walking straight into a decision that could break his family apart. Is this the episode where the dance of the dragons finally stops simmering and becomes something no one can stop? I don't think Baela is being talked about enough right now, and I believe that's about to change fast. She lost her twin sister's husband. She's grieving Jace in her own way, and I think the show is quietly building her into someone far more dangerous than anyone expects. Is she about to make a decision that surprises everyone around her? I believe Rhaenyra's storyline is heading somewhere just as unpredictable. I don't think she's just sitting in the background anymore, tucked away for safety with the twins. I think there's a reason the show keeps circling back to her, and I don't believe it's simply to remind us she exists. What does she know that no one else does yet? I don't think Corlys Velaryon is done shaping this war either, even from the sidelines. I believe his ships, his alliances, and his name still carry more weight than people realize, especially now that Rhaenyra has lost 2 of the sons tied directly to his bloodline. Does he still believe this fight is worth what it's already cost his family? I think Jane Arryn is one of the most underestimated pieces on this entire board. I believe the Vale's strength has barely been used so far, and I don't think that's an accident. What happens the moment Rhaenyra actually needs those forces to show up? I don't think Cregan Stark is going to stay quiet in the north forever. I believe the show is saving him for exactly the moment when Rhaenyra's position looks weakest, not strongest. Is his loyalty as solid as everyone assumes? Or is Winter simply waiting for the right price? I believe Mysaria is still one of the most dangerous people left in this story, and I don't think she's finished with Rhaenyra just because she helped her once. I think there's a debt sitting between them that hasn't been settled yet. What does Mysaria actually want in return for everything she's already given? I don't think the small council around Rhaenyra is as loyal as it looks either. I believe grief and fear have a way of exposing who really supports a ruler and who's only pretending to. Is there someone close to her right now quietly working against everything she's trying to build? I think Vermithor is the piece of this puzzle that keeps getting overlooked. I believe a dragon that powerful, sitting unclaimed, is exactly the kind of detail this show doesn't introduce without a plan. What happens if someone unexpected finally claims him? I don't think Sheep Stealer's rider being connected to Daemon is where this story stops either. I believe once that truth comes out, it doesn't just threaten his family. It threatens how every single person in Rhaenyra's court sees him from that point forward. Does loyalty to the crown survive once blood is involved? I believe Rhaenyra's paranoia is going to start bleeding into how she treats the people closest to her, not just her enemies. I don't think grief this deep stays contained to strangers and soldiers. Who around her is going to be the first to feel that shift personally? I think Otto Hightower's death changes more than just the balance of power on the green side. I believe it removes the one voice that was actually trying to slow Alicent and Aegon down from making reckless decisions. What happens now that no one is left to talk anyone out of anything? I don't think Alicent is finished either, even though she's stepped back from real authority. I believe a mother who has already lost control of one son isn't going to sit quietly while Ormond and the War Council make decisions that could get her remaining children killed. Does she try to intervene? And if she does, is anyone still willing to listen to her? I believe Sir Simon Strong's fate is far from settled, and I don't think Harrenhal falls into anyone's hands cleanly. I think there's a version of this story where his death creates just as much chaos as it resolves. Who actually benefits if that bloodline disappears entirely? I don't think Aemond wakes up the same person he was before Harrenhal, even if he survives. I believe near death changes a man like that, and I think what he does with a second chance says more about his character than anything he's done so far. Does he come back more cautious or more ruthless than ever? I think the timing of Darien's return is deliberate in a way most people are missing. I believe the show placed him back into the story right as Aegon disappeared for a reason, not as a coincidence. Is he being positioned as a replacement figure whether he wants that role or not? I don't think Ormond's ambitions stop at removing Rhaenyra from the throne either. I believe a man holding the largest army in Westeros, a legitimate claimant, and access to a dragon starts thinking bigger than just winning a war. What does he actually want once the fighting stops? I believe the emotional toll on Daemon is going to surface in ways that have nothing to do with the mission Rhaenyra gave him. I don't think a man can hunt his own child and walk away from that unchanged, no matter which choice he makes. Does this break something in his marriage that never fully heals? I think Rhaenyra's next move on the throne is going to test every single person who swore loyalty to her. I believe a queen operating from grief and fear doesn't ask for opinions the way she used to. Who's the first person brave enough or reckless enough to challenge her? I don't think this episode wraps up a single one of these threads cleanly either. I believe every storyline we've walked through is designed to collide even harder once the fighting actually starts. So which one of these characters do you think breaks first? And which one comes out of episode 3 more dangerous than we've ever seen them? I don't think Hugh Hammer is getting nearly enough attention right now. And I believe that's a mistake, because a dragon seed who's already proven he can hold on to a dragon in battle is exactly the kind of loose piece that decides which side actually wins this war. I think the show is setting him up as someone Rhaenyra either needs to control fast or loses completely. What happens if his loyalty starts shifting the moment he realizes how replaceable he actually is to her? I believe Ulf White is even more unpredictable than Hugh, and I don't think anyone around Rhaenyra has fully accounted for that yet. I think a man who claimed a dragon almost by accident isn't going to sit quietly while queens and lords decide his fate for him. Does he stay loyal because it benefits him? Or does he start looking for a better offer the second things get dangerous? I don't think the small folk of King's Landing are as behind Rhaenyra as the court wants to believe either. I believe grief and food shortages have a way of turning quiet resentment into something louder, and I think this episode starts showing cracks in how the city actually feels about its queen. What happens the first time the people she's supposed to protect stop trusting her? I believe the financial strain on the crown is about to collide directly with the war effort in a way that makes both problems worse. I don't think a queen who can't pay her soldiers or feed her city gets to focus purely on strategy anymore. Does desperation start forcing Rhaenyra into decisions that look less like ruling and more like survival? I don't think Larys Strong is done manipulating this war from the shadows either, even with Otto gone. I believe a man who's already proven he'll burn his own family alive for advancement isn't going to stop just because one obstacle disappeared. What does he actually want out of the chaos building on the green side right now? I believe Tywin Lannister's position is more fragile than people are giving him credit for. I don't think the Lannister forces are as firmly committed to the Greens as the show wants us to assume, especially with money already becoming a problem for both sides. Does gold end up deciding loyalty faster than any actual battle does? I think the Triarchy sitting quietly across the narrow sea is the kind of detail this show doesn't just forget about. I believe outside forces watching Westeros tear itself apart from within are exactly the kind of threat that shows up right when everyone's too exhausted to deal with it. What happens if this war creates an opening for someone entirely outside the family to take advantage of? I don't think Rhaenys' death has finished shaping this story either, even though she's been gone for a while now. I believe her sacrifice at Rook's Rest still hangs over every decision Rhaenyra makes, especially now that she's lost sons of her own. Does that loss quietly push Rhaenyra toward becoming exactly the kind of ruler Rhaenys never wanted her to be? I believe Baela's connection to Moondancer is going to matter more than people expect going into this next stretch of the war. I don't think a young rider who's already lost so much is going to stay cautious for long. What happens the first time she decides grief is worth more than restraint? I think the faith of the Seven is a piece of this conflict that keeps getting ignored, and I don't believe that silence lasts. I believe a war this brutal, with a queen killing men herself and a city struggling to eat, is exactly the kind of situation that turns religious tension into open unrest. Does the faith stay neutral, or does someone push them into picking a side? I don't think Alicent's retreat from power is permanent either, even if it looks that way right now. I believe a mother who watched one son die and another son vanish isn't capable of staying silent forever, especially with Ormond and the War Council making decisions without her input. What does she risk the moment she decides to step back in? I believe Criston Cole's position with the Green Forces is far less secure than it seems on the surface. I don't think a man who's already made questionable calls in this war gets unlimited trust from people like Ormond. Does his authority start slipping the moment someone more capable steps forward to challenge it? I think the absence of any real communication between Rhaenyra and Alicent is going to matter more as this season moves forward. I don't believe two women who once loved each other stay enemies without at least one moment where that history almost breaks through. What happens if they end up face-to-face again before this war is over? I believe Rhaenyra naming Daemon to hunt down Jace's killer says something uncomfortable about how she's starting to rule. I don't think she considered, even for a moment, that the answer might come back pointing at her own husband's family. Does that blind spot end up costing her more than she realizes? I don't think the dragon pit and the political weight it carries is finished being relevant either. I believe whoever controls the remaining unclaimed dragons controls the actual direction of this war far more than any army does. What happens the moment someone realizes Vermithor is still sitting there waiting? I believe the timing of Aemond's injury couldn't be worse for the Greens, and I don't think that's a coincidence the show wants us to overlook. I think losing their most dangerous dragon rider right as Ormond starts pushing for full-scale war leaves a gap someone else has to fill fast. Does Ormond end up relying on dragons he doesn't actually have full control over? I don't think Rhaenyra fully understands yet what killing Otto herself signaled to the people watching her do it. I believe there's a difference between being feared because you're powerful and being feared because you're unpredictable, and I think she just crossed into the second category. Does that fear help her hold the throne, or does it start pushing allies away from her? I believe every one of these threads, the dragon seeds, the small folk, the money, Larys, the faith, Alicent's silence, is building toward the same collision point. I don't think Episode 3 resolves any of it cleanly. So which one of these quiet threats do you think ends up causing the most damage before this war is anywhere close to over? I don't think Sunfire's condition has been fully explained to viewers yet, and I believe that gap is deliberate. I think a dragon that badly burned surviving at all raises a bigger question about what Aegon comes back to if he ever does return to the throne. Does a king still command respect riding a dragon that can barely fly? I believe Helena's storyline is one of the most overlooked threads heading into this next stretch of the war. I don't think a woman who's already lost one child to violence stays passive forever, especially with Aegon gone, and the Green Council making decisions without her. What happens if grief pushes her toward a moment of clarity no one expects from her? I don't think Adam of Hull has said his last word in this story either, even though he's barely been given screen time. I believe a dragon seed with Valerian blood sitting quietly in Corlys's world is exactly the kind of detail this show plants early and cashes in later. What happens the moment his connection to that bloodline actually matters? I believe Sea Smoke being unclaimed is still one of the most dangerous loose threads in this entire war. I don't think the show introduces a riderless dragon of that size without eventually giving him back to someone who changes the balance of power completely. Who do you think ends up claiming him first? I don't think Corwin Corbray and the Vale's military structure are getting enough attention right now. I believe a house that powerful sitting mostly on the sidelines is going to matter the moment Rhaenyra actually needs bodies on a battlefield instead of promises in a letter. Does the Vale show up when she needs them? Or does distance end up costing her everything? I believe Gerardis, as Rhaenyra's maester, knows more about the state of the crown's resources than he's let on so far. I don't think a queen this desperate for money ignores the one person whose entire job is managing that exact problem. What does he tell her that she doesn't want to hear? I don't think the war council around Rhaenyra agrees on nearly as much as they present to her. I believe grief has a way of exposing fractures that were always there. And I think Jace's death is the moment those disagreements start becoming impossible to ignore. Who ends up pushing back against her decisions first? I believe the Valyrian fleet is quietly becoming one of the most important assets left in this war, especially with Corlys still alive and still influential. I don't think naval power gets talked about enough compared to dragons, but I think it's going to decide more of this conflict than people expect. What happens if control of the seas shifts before either side realizes it's happening? I don't think Jaehaerys's death earlier in the story has finished shaping how Rhaenyra makes decisions either. I believe losing a child to something as sudden and senseless as that murder taught her that safety is never guaranteed, not even inside her own walls. Does that fear explain why she's willing to go further now than she ever would have before? I believe Baela is going to be forced into a leadership role faster than anyone expects, especially with Jace gone and Rhaenyra unraveling under the weight of the crown. I don't think a girl who's already proven she can handle a dragon in battle stays in the background much longer. What happens the first time she's asked to make a decision no one else is willing to make? I don't think the logistics of feeding an army and a city at the same time are being taken seriously enough by the characters in this story either. I believe winter pressures combined with a war this expensive create exactly the kind of desperation that forces alliances no one saw coming. Does hunger end up deciding loyalty faster than any battle does? I believe Rhaenyra's connection to the twins is going to matter more as protection becomes harder to guarantee. I don't think 2 children with Targaryen blood stay hidden forever in a war where every claimant is a target. What happens the moment someone realizes exactly where they are? I don't think Criston Cole's reputation among his own soldiers is as solid as the Green Council assumes either. I believe men fight differently for a commander they trust completely versus one they're simply following out of necessity. Does that difference start showing the moment real pressure hits the battlefield?